Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike, and I'm the programs director here at Africa Fire Mission. We're so happy that you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's virtual training session. This week, we're joined again by Talbot Brooks. He's going to be providing us with some technical resources that can help us assist in wildland urban interface, talking about some bushfires and how that interacts with population areas. Before we get started with today's training, a couple administrative notes. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you will receive a certificate of attendance for today's class. The name that shows up on that certificate is the name that you've got on your Zoom screen there. So if you need to adjust that, please take care of that. When we get finished with today's training at the top of the hour, we'll pass things over to Jose Nanjiri. He is Africa Fire Mission's Fire Safety Officer, and he's going to host a tea time where we can ask questions about today's class or anything else that may be on your mind. It's a great time to do some networking and things like that. Before we get started, I'm going to pass things over to Jose, and he's going to give us a few words of encouragement.
Thank you so much, Chief Mike. I truly appreciate you always for being here on Wednesdays. And also our speaker for the day. Truly, thank you for finding time to share knowledge that you have. Our trainer today is Mr. Talbot. Well, I was just looking at, and I think I've talked about this topic before, but it just came up to me again. And I was looking at what's the importance of community or brotherhood in the fire service, you know? And then the concept of brotherhood or community in the fire service is vital for several reasons, because can you imagine you have this person, those people who have 48, 4 days off, you have this person for 48 hours in the kitchen, washing the firehouse, in the fire ground. Man, then you need to have some concepts and some importance, what is vital for this. And number one of the things that came through my mind is mutual support and trust. This is somebody who supports you even at your work, your weaknesses, your learning curves. This is somebody who supports you. This is somebody who you need to trust, because we're all human, and sometimes you can go to a fire ground and you're really scared of maybe a certain fire. So trusting this person and saying, hey, I was scared on this fire, how is it going to take you? So it's very good that this person that you have can give you some emotional support. Another thing that I saw was teamwork and cohesion. Can you imagine you're in the firehouse or in the fire ground, and you have this person who's always grumpy on you or doesn't want to really give you that help, So when you get somebody who's an effective team player, it is easier for you to actually do your job. So I'll not delve so much in the concepts and the vital things in the Brotherhood of Fire. Those two items, think about it, and also ask this question. Even as I hand this mic to Chief Mike, are you that person who your brother in the firehouse can run to? If you are not, please tell yourself it is time for me to be that person that can give mutual support and can be effective towards giving teamwork. Thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Chief Mike.
Thank you very much, Jose. We always appreciate you being with us as well and sharing your words of encouragement, all the work that you do for fire prevention and to try to assist firefighters throughout all of Africa. I think at this point in time, we've covered everything that we need to, got all of our administrative business out of the way. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn things over to Talbot to get us started with today's training.
Thanks, Mike and Jose. My name's Talbot Brooks, and I'm a fire officer in Mississippi. I teach at the U.S. National Fire Academy, uh, and I work for the United Nations in disaster management, uh, as well as at a university. I've got plenty to keep me busy during the day. Um, I'm going to try, I learned this last time, to keep the chat window open, and I've seen that a lot of the topics uh, of concern recently to this group were around wildland fire and wildland fire management. And there are some very simple and some very sophisticated resources that are available to you to better plan for and understand the potential risk of wildland fire in your jurisdictions. Is this reasonably on topic, uh, Jose? Yeah. All right. So uh, I think everybody should have internet access, and the basic starting place for doing an assessment of risk in wildland fire, you can actually turn to Google Maps, right? I have Nairobi on screen, and if let's have a discussion. I don't quite know if y'all can unmute or not, but um, where are the primary concerns? What type of environment is a primary concern for wildfire in your region? You can put it in the chat or unmute or whatever. Anybody?
You can put your answers in the chat, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Looking for areas of wildland fire or bushfire concerns.
No ideas? Can everybody hear me? All right, there's an answer. Okay. Nairobi National Park surrounding the airport. But let's think about that then. What does that represent? Do we have a term for it in the fire service? So we would consider that the wildland urban area interface, right? And because you're not gonna, let's face it, are you gonna have a wildland fire here in Nairobi? Anybody? Probably not, right? But at that wildland urban interface, this is a risk, right? And uh, uh, the easy tool for starting to assess some of this is look at the satellite imagery from Google Maps. It's free. It doesn't necessarily use a lot of data, and you can identify where your higher risk areas are and use that for things like vegetation management or creating zones that decrease the amount of vegetation and uh, um, not that you necessarily have a whole lot of control over it, but you can also uh, uh, work with uh, community communities along that interface to help them develop an evacuation plan or take action around their homes that protect them better from a wildland fire. Simple things like when it's fire season and you see things drying out, they can make sure that places that sparks and embers can blow into their home are covered, right? So there's some basic things, and so Google Earth and Google Maps provide a very nice tool set for exploring the interface between urban areas and wildland areas where you might experience some wildfire. Now, I look at Nairobi, and for the most part, things seem to stay quite green, but there is a dry season. Am I correct?
Yes.
Right? Okay. So let me ask the next kind of question. Can you identify ahead of time in this wildland urban interface using some free tools here where your fire danger as a firefighter is going to be the highest? Let's talk about that for a minute then. What governs fire behavior in the wildland environment? What are some of the contributing factors? Lucius? Anybody have some ideas, or am I not? Is the audio not clear?
Sometimes it takes a little time to get warmed up.
What's going to kill you in a wildland fire environment?
Smoke.
You want to know? Any cheats in here? I heard somebody. A little louder, please.
Yeah, it's smoke. Especially if you don't pay attention to wind direction. Sure.
Ah, all right, good. Wind direction. All right, and so that lays in weather, right? Weather should be a significant concern. What else?
Comment in the chat says topography.
Topography, absolutely, right? The terrain. And so, okay, and there's really one other big element.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel also drought contribute to wildland fires
Drought.
and also lighting.
Yes, drought and lightning, and we'll consider those as part of weather. One is really gets towards the other big concern here. What does drought do? What is the effect? Will green vegetation burn? Right? If you have a healthy green tree and you go outside and take a cigarette lighter, unless it's a eucalyptus that's covered in oils, you're going to have a very hard time starting a fire in green vegetation. But if you've had drought and it's dry, then you're very much doing getting materials, duff, and what have you, that can catch fire. And we call that the fuel load, right? So if you take a combination of fuel load, the amount of combustible materials in a given area, and combine them with the weather and the topography, then you are able to start identifying some really high risk areas, both in terms of fire spread and but also as a safety concern. And so for my area here right now, we are in our dry season in Mississippi, and we've worked ahead of time to both work out where what the plans are at these interfaces between occupied areas and the wildland, but we've also identified, okay, these are places we're just going to give up to fire. They're not worth the risk for any of a number of reasons, but most all of them have to do with the terrain, the weather, and the fire fuel load that's available. And when you're working in the U.S., there are a number of services that are available that provide these sorts of data to us. But you're not in that high-tech environment necessarily. But you do have access to, should have access to Google Earth. And so the first and easiest, with a little skill, you can look, and is this mostly grassland or is this forested area on the screen? Who's in Nairobi? No? Well, if you're not sure, one of the nice things is you've got Google Street View for much of the country, actually. Let's look at what the fuel load is. So this is obviously somewhat dry. This isn't real time, but are there a lot of trees here that are combustible, or is most of the fuel load low? This is what type of fire would you expect in this area? This you're going to see, and you need to understand what types of fire loads available here. You've got light fuels grasses, which means that the fire can spread really fast, particularly when it's wind driven. You'll get a fair amount of ash. A lot of these bushes make a type of hydrocarbon that makes them flashy. They'll burn rapidly, really hot, and release a lot of black smoke, right? Have you had fire out here in Nairobi National Park? Anybody?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Have you had fires in Nairobi National Park that threaten the city?
Currently, I'm located in Malawi.
In Malawi, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll visit Malawi in a few minutes then. Okay. The point is,
it's hard to know because the park is kind of protected, and if there are any fires in the park, the Kenya Wildlife will look into it or will help let it go. I think that's my feeling. I'm in Nairobi, but I've never heard of any fires in the Nairobi National Park as yet of now.
Because when I looked at this is Nairobi National Park. You have a very small buffer zone of the southern bypass, and then you're into vegetation that is going to be combustible and high occupancy residences along that border. So this wildland urban interface, in the dry season now, and the wind from the south, light flashy fuel, you have the potential for fire spread into these neighborhoods. Even more so because the old airport is here, and you can have issues there. So just identifying areas where the built environment is adjacent to open spaces where there are wildland fuels, creates a tremendous potential for fire spread. And if you think about the weather conditions and the status of the fuels ahead of time and the terrain, the topography, you can start thinking about and preparing for the problem ahead of time. The best fire is one that never happens. I have a very strong opinion on prevention. So you can use simple tools like Google to understand fuel loads and exposure, right, where the fires could spread if one were to start. And I like maps, and so using even a printout of this in a colored pencil to mark some high-risk areas is not a bad idea. Terrain is the other component somebody brought up. Again, in Google, you can change from the street map to the satellite image to a terrain map. And this terrain map, you can figure out what's uphill, what's downhill. Does fire move faster uphill or downhill? Yeah, let me try this. I've been having a problem with my microphone here. I'm going to change to phone here. Give me just a minute.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just you are in the meeting now.
Does this help? If you don't mind putting in the chat, at least, if you can hear me a bit better. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that with free resources like Google Maps, you can switch the layers. Yeah, you can now switch the types of maps that you're looking at and use them to help do surveys about both the potential risk. In this case, I was looking at Nairobi National Park and how it abuts or is right next to some very high occupancy residential areas. And you can think about the conditions that would create a nasty fire that could spread to a large number of buildings. And you can think about things like evacuation routes from those places as part of local outreach. I'm very keen on the best fire is one that's never happened, and that a little planning can go a long way to saving a lot of lives. So you can use a combination of street view and satellite imagery to do these very simple assessments on the potential types of fuels, which will govern fire behavior, and look at their locations. Nairobi National Park is to the south of the city, so if the wind is blowing from the north and there's a fire, the risk should be very different from a situation where the wind is blowing from the south and there's a fire, right? The other aspect of Google Maps is they have these terrain maps, and you can identify what's uphill and what's downhill. And one of the questions I asked is, does a fire move faster uphill or downhill? And you could put it in the chat or however you would like to answer. But I can sit here and wait. I'm sorry, say again?
I guess fire moves fast downhill just because of the gravitation force.
Yeah, but fire is does heat rise or sink? Which direction does smoke go, up or down?
Goes up.
Right? So you should always be
Hello, sir.
looking. Yes, hello.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I feel like in most cases, fire moves faster uphill than downhill.
Yes, and and the reason is because heat rises. So, in the absence of any wind or any other factor, fire always spreads up, right? And so, if you look at the terrain map here and were to move around, okay, let's look here. In the Nyong Hills Forest Reserve, is that correct? Again, when I started just simply looking at this, and I can go to Google Street View, I can look at the terrain here where it's up and down a fair amount, and in the uphill directions, you can expect the fire to move much faster. And the steeper the terrain, often the greater the rate at which a wildland fire moves. So if you had a situation where it's very dry and you have some tall fuels and some flashy fuels below, grass below in these neighborhoods, let's see if I can. Now I can't get in the street view there. So this is where a little local knowledge goes a long way. But you can see that the terrain is steep, that there are these ridge lines. So if the wind was from the east, it would channel the fire very quickly up the terrain. And there's an abbreviation used, I think that Mike's going to get into later, LCES, which is the look out, communicate, and my brain is seizing.
Escape routes and safety zone.
Thank you. Good grief. And so, you really don't want to be uphill of a fire that's traveling to the west here, because it can move very quickly. And as you can see, that's steep. These are fuels that are going to burn very fast. This is for all intents and purposes a no-go zone. Let it burn. stay out of the way, stay safe, brothers. And even the little bit of terrain that you find in the urban area, it's not a mountain, but it's steep enough for short runs to allow that fire again to it'll burn up this hill faster than it would down. Now, obviously, the image they shot with this is during the rainy season, so not much problem there. Okay, so does that make sense? Hopefully, the terrain, the vegetation type, and then your exposure. Where does the wildland meet an urban area, or is a small village or something is surrounded? You can do things like encourage what we would call defensible perimeters. I can go back to the area here around Nairobi National Park and looking at the satellite imagery here. And one of the best prevention things you could do here is as is what's happened here, is there's no vegetation. Go strip it out, or encourage that property owner to make sure that the fire can't move across. Don't give it any fuel on the other side of the road. Use this as a protective barrier, and inform the people that live in these areas that they need to create these defensible perimeters. And I'll send out some links later about how maybe the U.S. thinks about it. We have what's called Firewise Communities. It's an education program to reduce risk in the urban wildland area. Somebody else had mentioned the weather, and I wanted to show you a free resource there. This is my favorite. It is called Ventuski, and I will send these links to Mike to distribute to everybody later. But it provides an integration of weather service data from around the world, and it's free to access, and it does a pretty fantastic job of showing what's happening at very small levels. You can change the base map. Right now I have this with a terrain map, so that, again, where I am here in Mississippi, I'm dealing with wildland fire season here. Look at the wind speed and direction and the terrain, and start making some immediate decisions when we start having fires this afternoon. The other thing that's neat with it is that it does include lightning strikes. And let me get to where there's some good thunderstorms. You can see some here over Burkina Faso now. And if we watch, you can see the actual lightning strikes, and they bring this down to about a 10-kilometer square area on a global basis. And what's even more interesting is this is the weather radar, and I can see the lightning and lightning frequency. But you can also, with it, look at the precipitation amount. Now, to see this has changed dramatically. The areas that are receiving the most precipitation are actually behind the storm front, and with all this lightning going off, chances of it striking some fuels here for a fire start is quite high. So you can change between the radar and the precipitation modes to see what the storm may be here, but it may not be producing any rain, just a lot of lightning. And comparing that with where rain is falling, this free tool can give you an idea, again, of where some of the fires might start. So for us, it's usually a match or some careless disposal of smoking materials or whatnot that starts a fire here. But we'll keep an eye out on lightning as well, because of its potential to start a fire. And this is where I live here. Okay, so this is just two, again, free resources. You can use Google Maps. You can use this Ventuski, it's called, and I would encourage you to just bookmark it and look at it every now and then and see if what it says the weather is actually matching up with what you're experiencing. It's always good to check the accuracy of these types of tools. Okay, so we got Google Maps, we got Ventuski. There are some other things that we can do to monitor that weather, that topography, and that fuel load and fire start. So one of them, and again, this will be in the package of links that I share with Mike to give to y'all, is called the Fire Information Resource Management System, or FIRMS. This is run by NASA, and it is completely free. And this shows places where fires may have potentially started as observed from space. And the basic requirement is a 300-meter or 300-meter area where the temperature exceeds about 600 degrees C. Will tell the satellite, hey, there's perhaps a fire here. And again, you can change the base maps. You can change the time period, so I can look at today. So in your region, this is some potential locations for fire start. I will change this base map layer to streets. It's a little easier to read and understand. Right, so again, this is just a tool, and if you are monitoring this, these provide areas in your county or your jurisdiction that, okay, maybe there is a low smoldering fire here that is the result of a lightning strike. You can see fairly closely where it is. Go look. And if this is a type of tool that you would like to use to play with, you can actually click on the pixels and get more information. Sometimes there's false reports that are created by things like the sun shining off of a big piece of glass or a satellite dish or things like that. But we know, okay, in the last 24 hours, there's a fire here that's at least 2 pixels, so you can see the size of the pixel. It's a kilometer by half a kilometer wide area that is hot, right? We're seeing that from being able to see that from space. And this is, again, global coverage, and the purpose of it is to provide some early warning. You know, there a lot of the places I know in Africa do not necessarily have the best warning systems in place to say, hey, there's a fire, especially wildland areas. This is one of the tools that can be used to help identify. Malawi has some issues today where fire might be present. Now, this doesn't separate between fire that's being used for land management purposes. One of my challenges here is I live in a very large agricultural area, and the farmers burn their fields every summer, and that's perfectly normal. But the satellite detection system doesn't make a distinction. It doesn't say this is a farm and it's an okay fire, or no, this is a wildland fire. So that's where using Google Maps or changing some of these layers can help guide what type of terrain, what type of environment you're looking at. And then this is your jurisdiction. You should hopefully know it best. Another resource I had mentioned. Okay, so we've got the terrain, the weather, in this case on screen, some of the ways to detect, get early warning that a fire may have started in an area where there's not a lot of observations. You want to be able to go put it out quick. You need to understand how green things are, right? Brown, dry vegetation burns much more rapidly than green, healthy vegetation. And so we can look at something that's called the Global Agricultural Monitoring System, and I can come and look at, this is what is called the NDVI anomaly, and what this says is how green is the vegetation compared to what is normal for this time of year. And in this case, this part of Kenya is way above normal, 125% above normal in terms of how green things are. So the risk of fire here right now is probably very low. You compare that with the area here in the Congo. This is very, very dry and probably prone to high fire risk. So if we were to compare that, you can see this area of the Congo here, very dry, and I were to switch back to this fire start and look at that area of the Congo, I would be very concerned right now. There's a lot of potential wildland fires starting in this region, and maybe ask government to tell farmers, hey, wait a couple of weeks before you burn your field, or get out with some shovels and some machetes and try to create some defensible areas before the fire occurs. Okay, now this is at more of a national level, and for senior fire chiefs with connections to government, but there are free resources that once the wildland fire starts through the United Nations and the EU, you can ask for some mapping support, some weather prediction support that's readily available and can get you some information. Again, I like to fight fire with information. And so I can look right now, for example, on the Copernicus website and go to their forest fire information system, and they have coverage that will extend to Africa. And right now, I'm looking at their live map, and I know there's a lot of horrible fires that are burning in Greece right now. But what I wanted to show you is they put together a global fire danger forecast. And green is good, not going to burn. Red is bad, the high potential for fire. And you can see that covers all of Africa as well. And the areas to the south of Nairobi, and not necessarily here in the national park, that looks to be okay, but a bit further south, you can see there are some high-risk areas where the vegetation is dry, and they'll often combine this with weather forecast for wind speeds and air temperatures, and some very concerning fire danger forecast around Meru and points further north right now. And I think the same is true down in Malawi. Yeah, some high fire danger here. And again, it's up to you to look at these kind of different resources and figure out a strategy that works best for your fire department with the resources that you have on hand. I can't tell you how to prepare necessarily, but I can provide you information that can help guide your decisions. Now, once there is a fire, there is a mechanism by which you can request detailed support from some of these global disaster management agencies. Again, Copernicus is one. It's no cost. There is an established chain of command to ask for this type of support. It's usually through the Interior Ministry, but we can come and look and see. This is right now for a wildland fire that is in the south of Spain. And we're monitoring not only in advance, in this case, this is after the fire. And what we're interested in is the soil erosion and how much vegetation has been burned. Why is this a problem? Why do we want satellite data and information about what's left after the fire is burned? The fire's out, you know. We're firemen. We all go home. Is this still a problem for us? Okay, I'll again clue in, and this is may not be as big an aggravation in the regions in which the people on this call work, but they certainly are here in North America, especially out west. That vegetation on hillsides is what's keeping the preventing a mudslide or a landslide. And as soon as we burn the vegetation off and kill it, if that's followed by heavy rains a month or two later, then we get the horrible landslides that destroy homes. And so there are resources available that show after the fire what's happened, because the people maybe living down low here think that they're safe, but they're surrounded by, you know, the fire department saved their community from burning. Yay, great job. But now there's no vegetation around the community, and there's heavy rains a month or two later, and the community still gets wiped out because there's a terrible landslide. So these are just a couple of a handful of the free resources and products that are available to you to do some planning. And that's, like I said, usually the best tool. Talk about it before it happens. Think about where the high fuels are, what the weather, which wind direction is typically blowing at a time of year, where the interface between wildland and urban occurs. What can you do to lower that risk by cutting vegetation back before the fire occurs. These are all tools that are at your disposal, and just because you're in a major city with a large amount of population doesn't mean that you don't have a high wildland fire risk. It may not have happened, but that doesn't mean that it can't. Our climate is changing in ways that we don't understand, and events and things that you never thought possible are becoming possible. You can ask the people in Hawaii about wildfire there, and they will tell a terrifying story. So, Mike, that's about all I wanted to cover. I'd rather open it to questions and discussions about some of these resources, and I'll provide you with a list in a format that's easy to distribute after the call.
All right, very good. Thank you, Talbot. We've got a little bit of time here yet for any kind of questions that you may have about utilizing some of these resources and utilizing this information technology as it relates to bushfire. So if you would like, you can unmute yourself. You can put a comment in the chat, use the raise hand feature, and we'll have the floor open for a couple questions.
Hello?
Hello.
Go ahead.
Good. So my name is Connor P. Erintes there. I'm the Deputy Director for Operation, Liberia National Fire Service. So my issue I have is that last class, I attended last class, and then I didn't receive a certificate because the first class I attended, I received a certificate. So at the last class, I didn't receive a certificate through my email. That's one.
We'll take care of that. Send me an email and I'll take care of that later for you.
Okay, so I can send an email here.
I'm sorry, did you have another question?
No, I'm going to come back again, please.
Good. Yeah, Stanley's asking what technology can help the firefighters spot bushfires before they occur. That is where you would want to use, and I'll share the screen again. You want to look at the dryness of the vegetation, and so that would be using this Copernicus tool that shows fire risk. And this is based on how green or dry, brown the vegetation in your area is, and shows it in combination with, it's deriving it from the weather as well. So in Kenya right now, as I said earlier, these are some of the areas with very high fire risk, are in the north, near Meru, and there is a moderate risk of wildland fire to the south of Nairobi, and these are big pixels. It's not a super detailed view, but it's really the best tools freely available for planning purposes. And if you're trying to figure out where it's going to occur in advance, you may do a combination of things then, and this is to do with the planning. You can use Google Earth to explore the terrain. You can use Street View to look at the types of fuels. You can use that weather forecasting tool, Ventuski, to see what the current and forecast weather conditions are, and if it's for no rain and high wind, and then you look at Copernicus and see that there's a high fire danger risk, then that's where I, as a fire chief, might even start pre-positioning or moving resources within my jurisdiction so that I'm ready. And I may do some alerts to the population to say, please, no outside burning. Don't burn the trash, or don't burn your agricultural field right now, because the chance of fire is our friend. The chance of it becoming our enemy when we're burning outdoors goes up very, very quickly. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure, sir. But again, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So what are the economic and social impact of wildland fires?
I'm sorry? The
I'm
social
saying,
economic
what are the,
consequence?
yeah, what are the economic and social impacts of wildland fires?
I think that varies tremendously based upon where you live, and it is very high impact when you lose a community or lose your home. I think it can and is, and there are some tools that show the impact of wildland fire by country. If I could get you maybe to send me an email after the fact here with where you live, I can provide some of those data to you. I think one of the important things I want to communicate, though, is for many disaster types, the frequency of prior occurrence is a good predictor of what might happen in the future. That isn't true with wildfire, with bushfire. If you live someplace where there's earthquakes, chances are the risk of earthquake over the last 200 years is going to be useful in predicting the risk of earthquake for the next 200 years. But for wildland fire, for bushfire, that's changed, and it's changing because of where we live. We're pushing into these natural areas that have higher potentials to burn, and the climate is changing enough that wildland areas that have never burned before are now starting to burn. And so we can look at the historic socioeconomic impact, but it is not necessarily a very good predictor going forward. The risks are increasing tremendously, and so there's a lot of discussion about managed fire to reduce fuel loads, to make fires more controllable when they occur. There's a lot of discussion about, where do we let people live? Sometimes national governments can create policies that help reduce that risk. And frankly, there needs to be a discussion with that increasing risk. There should be increasing funding to the fire service, because, as you are quite rightly identifying, the cost in terms of disruption of the economies and disruption to the population due to wildfire is quite high. It costs a lot of money.
Excellent. Thank you, Talbot. I think we've got a couple other questions in the chat, but at this point in time, we're going to wrap the formal portion of our training up with a big thank you to Talbot for coming today and sharing his expertise with us all. And thanks to all of you for joining us, for using your bundles. and taking the time out of your schedules to better yourselves and better what you can do to serve the community. Stick around. We're going to swing into our tea time now. But I just want to thank everyone and hope to see you all again next week.